Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our talks with Walt, as we are calling our readings, our study through the deathbed edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. We turn now in the drum tap section to a little poem, Look Down Fair Moon. This is poem number 33 of the 43 poems of drum tap, so you can get a sense of how we're coming to the end. We've pointed out in every one of our lectures with drum taps the way that Whitman early on in the deathbed edition of Leaves of Grass said in a poem called To the Old Cause, "My book and the war are one." And we've been looking at all of the different ways that you can understand that line. When we come to this poem, we're going to be stunned at a whole new way of looking at the war through the prism of just a few lines, as we pointed out already. As we near the end of the drum tap section, we're going to see these little short poems. They're just little glimpses. I think they're often overlooked. I think they're some of the more important poems in Leaves of Grass. And I'm going to hope to make that argument now. Now, the assumption is that you've been with us from the very beginning at learnstrong.net. Down that left-hand side, Talks with Walt is our playlist. And from the inscriptions, poems, all the way up to and including a set of introductory comments to drum taps. And then we just finished with Tan-Faced Prairie Boy. Now, our Nortons, which gives us our background information, will tell us that this poem has remained in drum taps unchanged through all editions to 1881, when Their, T-H-E-I-R, was excluded before arms in the third line, the only editing of this poem. Now, I want to point out that there is a certain understanding in reading Leaves of Grass that Whitman is taking multiple perspectives on the war and the experience of the war. So we'll ask, what's going on now in this experience? And by the way, we've already seen Whitman personifying the moon, okay, and we saw this in Dirge for Two Veterans in an earlier poem. So now we're going to go straight to it. Look down, fair moon. Look down, fair moon, and bathe this scene. Pour softly down night's nimbus, floods on faces, ghastly, swollen, purple, on the dead, on their backs, with arms tossed wide. Pour down your unstinted nimbus, sacred moon. Now, I find it amazing that here we are, how many poems into Leaves of Grass? And there are some readers who could begin to ask, well, is Whitman, can Whitman surprise me anymore? And I'm stunned by this poem, guys. I have to tell you, this is one of those little poems in Leaves of Grass that I come back to and I'm like, what did I just read? And even you could maybe sense it as I was reading it. I'm not altogether sure to know how to read this poem. Of course, nimbus will be for us a central word of this poem, and the deification in some ways of the moon will obviously play its part as well. By the way, go back to Out of the Cradle Endlessly Rocking. I think it is a companion read to this, and go back and look at what we had to say and reread it, and then come back to look at Look Down, Fair Moon. Of course, look down is language from Salut Amant, passage 12, if you want to go back and look at that one. Fair moon. Now, fair here is an interesting word, and Whitman's audience of knowing their Hamlet would understand, are you honest, are you fair, in Hamlet's exchange of Hamlet 3:1 with Ophelia. And of course, fair is foul and foul is fair, hover through the fog and filthy air would be Shakespeare's rendering in Macbeth 1:1. This use of the word fair. Now, is it going to mean beautiful? Probably. But as and the beautiful moon, I mean, this is an ancient tradition from Homer and from Virgil. The celebration of the moon is beautiful. And yet, notice how he sets us up. Look down, fair moon, and bathe this scene. Oh, you kind of look at it and you go, wow, it's very solemn, it's very serene, it's very beautiful. We're going to get a scene with the beauty of the moonshine. But then notice he just pours it on. No pun intended. Pour softly down night's nimbus. Of course, this notion of the halo, right? You'll remember this use of this word in I Sing the Body Electric 5 when we talked about it there. Pour softly down night's nimbus, floods. And again, the idea of flooding, which is we're going to end up in water, so it's kind of a remarkable. The beauty, that the effect, the solemn effect, the way that the moon, when one looks at it on a clear night, does look like a halo of a kind. All of that to say, all of that light, that beautiful light, radiant light, is pouring down on faces, and the way in which Whitman has talked about faces takes us back to Song of Myself 48. Why do I wish to see God better than this day? I see something of God in each moment, and in the face, in my own face, in the glass. So faces has been a central part of our reading of Leaves of Grass. But notice the faces are ghastly, swollen, and purple. What? Wait, what? And then it hits us, because it's in drum taps. Oh. In other words, we have bodies who have been lying there. Notice, they're ghastly. Notice, ghastly and ghostly is so close together that I think Whitman chooses this word intentionally. Swollen, of course, because the bloating is starting. And I told you guys about color and drum taps, and here we are now with the use purple. And he continues, on the dead. And again, it's just like it just kind of jerks you like, wait, what? Wait. We were talking about the beauty of the moon, and yet the beauty of the moon is on these grotesque images of the dead. On their backs, with arms tossed wide. You'll remember this use of tossed wide, this idea of tossed from Boston Ballad. The idea of on their backs, this is really the only time that we've seen it like this. It's just fascinating. Or on their face or on their back. Pour down, he says it one more time, right? And again, takes us back to Out of the Cradle, Endlessly Rocking. Your unstinted nimbus, sacred moon. Now, what are we going to do with a poem like this? Again, I'm stunned by a poem like this. It just sits here at the end of drum taps and okay. So this is a collection of poems about the Civil War, and we've argued that what's going on is a sustained theodicy. We have to explain, why did this horrific thing happen? And yet notice here that the moon, the nimbus, the halo quality, the divinity quality of the moon, is looking down on this scene, but with what kind of emotion or feeling is being played here? Well, I can't help but argue that we're looking now at a naturalism, if we can use that term. When we study Crane's Red Badge of Courage, of course, we call it a naturalism. You'll remember that from 1895. And we teach Red Badge of Courage from the perspective of naturalism, and that is to say what? Well, nature really doesn't have an opinion about all of the pain and suffering of the world, because that is the human condition. Again, we're back to the question of theodicy. I think that 2A, our message here is that the importance of human suffering, nature has no interest in whatsoever. It doesn't seem to care very much at all about the fact that we live and we suffer and then we die in horrific ways. The moonshine comes down regardless. At 2B, the personification of the moon is something that we've already seen, and yet notice it's almost like a deification as well. And what exactly is it that Whitman is suggesting in a poem like this? Well, I can't help but, already I've mentioned Crane's Red Badge of Courage, and I want to take us to the classic of all classics, I think, in the presentation of this, in Sarah Teasdale's. And I think Teasdale was very much influenced by this. In 1918, you'll remember this poem. There will come soft rains. I've given a full exegesis of this on learnstrong.net. There will come soft rains, and the smell of the ground, and swallows circling with their shimmering sound, and frogs in the pond singing at night, and wild plum trees in tremulous white. Robins will wear their feathery fire, whistling their whims on a low fence wire, and not one will know of the war. Not one will care at last when it's done. Not one would mind, neither bird nor tree, if mankind perished utterly. And spring herself, when she woke at dawn, would scarcely know that we were gone. Of course, Ray Bradbury's classic, There Will Come Soft Rains of 1950, I've given a full lecture on that as well at learnstrong.net, will play a very similar kind of game. In the end, how are you going to wrap your arms around a poem like this? Well, I think it's a fair question to ask, and I think Whitman wants us to ask this question of our big five. You'll remember epistemology and ontology, the question of being, psychology, sociology, with the last of those being that notion of theodicy. What do you think about this idea that in the end, that really the universe does not care about human suffering and pain? Where do you come down on that part of Whitman's amazing theodicy? I hope these poems are challenging you. Thank you.